I'd like to welcome you to the webinar, Key Areas to Modernize for IBM Z-Report Output Management. My name is Sal Belconte, and I'm the Vice President of Technical Services and Support for SEA. I'll be joined a bit later today by my colleague Mark Payne, one of our senior consultants, who will get into more details as well. Our agenda for this webinar, well, we're going to sort of go over a slide or two here about SEA and our history and what we've been doing in this great area over the last 38 years, excuse me. We'll talk about what we've observed in the areas of output management trends and challenges, because it certainly is changing. And that's really a key area we want to discuss. Related to that, we're going to get into a discussion of our SEA output management model, and that's the architecture that we've developed that basically addresses these challenges that we've come across. At that point, I'll turn it over to Mark, who will get into the details in the areas we can look at to modernize your output management system. We'll summarize at the end, and if we have some time, which we should hopefully, we'll go through any questions that we encounter. So let's start with a discussion about SEA. We're extremely proud that over the past 38 years that we've been in business, we have well over 1,000 ZOS customers worldwide. We're focused in an area that is important, very important to global business, and that is the batch process, ensuring that our customers can achieve and sustain a cost-effective, high-quality batch environment. We do that over the years. We've done that over the years very successfully by ensuring that we keep our products relevant based on the needs of our customers as the times change, and combining that with the very best vendor expertise. We have tremendous folks on board here who have many, many years experience in all aspects of the batch processes, and certainly in today's topic, output management. We recognize that today's footprint, the data center footprint, requires an interdependence of platforms in order for customers to service, for our businesses, to service our customers. And we are demonstrating over the years that a long-term commitment to ensure that we provide what's needed for our customers to address their customers' needs. We are extremely proud of our support over the years, tremendous reputation. When you call SEA, you will always get a human. We're there 24/7, 365, put you in contact very quickly with someone who can help you with your issue. Let's talk a bit now about what we've observed, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years in the output management world across the globe, and what customers are facing, what businesses are facing, and the needs that they have. Well, as you know, no doubt, things are certainly changing. But always, throughout time, always the number one challenge is usually, and we recognize that, is reducing costs. I mean, that's a mantra, right, over the years. But you want to do that within the constraints, within the scope of what you're trying to achieve and value, right, for your business and for your customers. So today's, in the last few years, we're hearing a lot about the DevOps approach, trying to accelerate delivery of applications, and trying to ensure that you're getting the apps out to your internal users and your external users, customers, as quickly as possible, right? What the challenges that they're faced with in doing that today, or what they expect are, for example, IDE plugins, Eclipse-based plugins, for desktop environments that are GUI based and accessible to accessing the log data and sysout. They're expecting web-enabled, responsive web-enabled user interfaces with very flexible, very typical, easy to use, intuitive type application. And very importantly now, especially, businesses are expecting the ability to have APIs available that will allow them to access their data, not from just within an individual application like our report distribution system, but to provide APIs that allow them to embed those APIs in other third-party products, say like SharePoint or things like that, where they want to be able to get to the reports from some other vendor product, or an in-house written piece of software that written in Java or what have you, that wants to be able to go against the report database and get data irrespective of what's provided through the report management system. Metrics are extremely important today with, we all know, with the focus on security requirements, governance of all different types, personal data requirements. A lot of folks want to know a lot more about who is getting to the reports. And that's beyond the security system, but okay, you've got all these reports available and certain people are allowed to see them, but who actually is browsing the reports? Who's actually going and using the reports? And that has a couple of different values, right? One is, well, the audit purpose, as we just mentioned, but also it's nice to know if you're producing a report that hasn't been looked at in 3 years, well, let's not produce it anymore and save those cycles, right? You've got to also, what we're hearing and we're seeing actually a fair amount of, surprisingly, is small to mid-sized businesses either going off the mainframe completely or targeting that, or they're sending one or more applications to be off mainframe. Now, the issue there is that if those applications have been on the mainframe for any number of years, they've got archived mainframe reports that most likely still need to be accessible, for a number of years yet. So you've got to be able to provide a capability, some method for those customers who want to leave the mainframe or move an application off the mainframe to still be able to have access to those reports that were produced maybe 10 years ago. It's all about unlocking the data and making the data available for whomever needs it and from wherever they need it. And that's the key. So the key features then that a report distribution system needs to have and needs to consider are, we listed some of them here, and Mark will get into some more as well. But for sysout and syslog, obviously accumulating the information, retaining it for as long as needed, and being able to get to it from green screen, from Eclipse space, from web access, etc. The reports need to be able to be identified and filtered in many different ways, depending on how your internal users and or your external users need to see them. What is it that they're looking for? That filtering process needs to be available and needs to be easy to use and needs to quickly identify and present the reports that meet the criteria. Need to have utilities that provide for audit purposes that enable audit compliance and the efficiency improvements that I mentioned earlier. For example, of finding who is or who isn't using reports that are being produced. The APIs of that are provided to access the database have to be available, and there are quite a few of them, more the better, to make it a flexible, capable, accessible from within applications to outside of necessarily your report distribution system. And obviously the ability to, when the time comes, if and when the time comes, to be able to move off mainframe and still have access to all those archive reports that were accumulated in years past. So in order to do that, what we have architected and we have created here is a tremendously flexible, tremendously open report management system, TRIMS, TRMS, and its sister product Sabres or Syslog. It's essentially what you're looking at here is a four tiers of accessibility. And I'm going to start from the top here and go down quickly to just give you an idea of the overall topology of the report distribution system, TRIMS, and then, as I said, Mark will touch on the more specifics. So the top layer here is our client layer, client-facing layer, able to access the reports, filter what the customers need from a web UI, very flexible, very powerful web UI that enables the capability to see and get to any of the reports whenever you need to. IDE plugins, particularly for the Sysout and Syslog, the Eclipse-based plugins that the developers can use, and when they're working on the integrated development environments like Topaz, CompuWare, or IBM's IDZ. The 3270 green screen, of course, is always a fallback, and many customers still are using that. Excuse me, as access to the reports. And we've got here listed here something called a Script Studio, which Mark will discuss in more detail, but essentially is denoting a method by which we have a very powerful cross-reference capability or indexing capability, excuse me, that allows indexing across reports, not just within a report, but across many reports. And Mark will get into that in more detail. From that layer, from that user interface layer, all these user interface points use the RESTful APIs to go through to the middle layer, which is the data and web server layers for us. And that is what, using those APIs, requests the data that's needed by the user interface. Those middleware interfaces, the servers, then determine which application they need to access, in the case of possibly application report services, or for Syslog, Sysout services, or the service, these view services are those that relate to when you move an application off the mainframe. So depending on which service, that's determined. And then finally, to the data layer, which may be certainly on the ZOS, the database, or it may be on a Windows or Linux instance for in the case of the moved archived reports. The ability to insert those APIs as well and use them from many different, we just have a slight splash of a few products here, but many different third-party vendor products that require or can benefit from having an API interface to the report distribution system. That's the very 50,000-foot high-level overview of the topology of TRIMS. And but the point is that it's extremely open, extremely flexible, and provides for addressing all those challenges that we talked about earlier. The goal here is that you have a system that's scalable. It can grow with this as your business grows, or expand or collapse as however your business needs happen to move. it's built to be to ensure availability so that there are serialized tasks, as we said here. So you have, in the case of redundancy and failure, you're going to be able to have a system available to you, and the reliability of a system that is running well, optimized, and meets your performance requirements. With that, I am going to turn it over to Mark Kane. Mark is one of our senior output management consultants, and Mark will take you through the details of the various areas that we can look at improving. Mark.
Thank you, Sal. What we're looking at right now is a representation of the three major components of our trim system. The top left, we're talking about the traditional mainframe databases that we're dealing with. The bottom is the web server. That is what your end users are going to be looking at. And this representation is showing that the way that the web server accesses the mainframe databases is through the data server. This is data server resides on the ZFS or the HFS platform on the mainframe. It's the web server that makes use of the APIs that we have. We have open APIs that we allow, and we have set it up so that our users can use these APIs as well. But that's it's the web server that actually makes use of these APIs, and it's the data server which basically translates these API requests into actual accesses of the the databases on the mainframe. And I'll be discussing the APIs in more detail later on. At the very bottom is what we call the script studio. That also resides on the web server, and that's a method that we use to develop methods of indexing existing reports to make it easier for your end users to find the data that they're looking for. Okay. Historically, the whole concept of content management was really a more technical issue, where the people involved in it were more systems oriented. But now what we're seeing in today's is that it's the end users that are less systems oriented, that they want to make these platforms intuitive and easily used by end users. This top left panel is just an example of what the sign-on script for what an end user how he would sign on to the system. Once he's signed on, you would see what's in the bottom right, which is an example of the criteria that you once presented, once into the system. It gives you a simple, intuitive way of referencing reports which you may have accumulated. This is a much larger list and normally not used, but this is an example of some of the criteria that can be used in the situation, where most common is report IDs and what date range for something. But you can also set up things like recipients and groups, and I want to be able to see the reports that are just accessible by a certain recipient, etc. We make use of wildcards so that you can set up reports that start with a certain character set, date ranges that are relative to today, that sort of thing. It's very it's very flexible as that, but it can be it can be set up very simply as well. So on the next screen, you'll see a more practical example of we're going to say here's a report and here's a group. We've set up a group that that is going to combine certain reports to say, hey, I want to see the demo reports and all that. So this is a situation where you can drop down and say, okay, these are the two criteria, report name and group ID, that I'm interested in. And on the next screen, you would see it filled out, where you're going to say, here, the report name starts with IND. That % sign is considered a wildcard character. and then you say, okay, I want a group ID, which is the demo system. Before I go on to the next screen, I want to pay attention to the top right hand. This what we call is a drop down that would show the different catalogs that you've set. So you can set up sets of databases in your environment based on a number of things. It could be, production versus test versus demo versus you can set it up databases based on your application itself, etc. And as I said, this gives you the ability to do a drop down and say, and as long as you're a valid user of that database, it'll as I say, you can continue this search. Once you've entered your search criteria, this is an example of the results of the search. One of the things that you want to take a look here at, is that you've got different columns. You've got report names and dates, and cycle is something that's similar to the date, whether you could use or not. You can click on these columns and you can organize and sort them. A very common method is to say, I want to look at the reports, but I want to click on I want to see the most current ones at the top of my list. So that's the most recent reports will be at the top. You can click and drag these columns so that if you like, one column to be in front of another, you can do that. You can, that blue button on the top right-hand side is saying, okay, this showed me all the possible columns I can set up and which ones that I really want to see. This can be saved so that when the user leaves and comes back, this will be all set up the way he likes to see it at future times that he signs on. Once you've actually chosen a report, this is an example. And this particular report is an example of what we call an indexed report. And what you have here on the left side is we have defined this report to be sensitive to certain strings on the page. And you can use this to index it, and then that will help you navigate through a particular report. This is actually limited to the actual version of this report. We'll be talking later about a new type of indexing that actually spans different reports, but this particular one is what we would more of a traditional indexing of a report that can sit there work throughout. You can also use the bottom screens. That's another way of navigating where you can say, next page or last page or first page, or you can go to an absolute page. So this makes it, it's just made to make it more intuitive to be able to navigate throughout your report. Once you've looked at it, you can still print. So you'll see the buttons on the top right-hand page. You can say, I want to save this as a PDF, or I could save this as just a text report. That index on the right will toggle off that left list of indexes. So if you don't want to see it, you can toggle that off and just look at it as a straight report. But as I say, it's just all for giving you an intuitive display of the report itself. This next screen is an example of what we call windowing. Certain reports lend themselves towards that, more of a spreadsheet format. And if you've got such a report like this, you can train trims to actually look at this and say, okay, I want to be sensitive to these columns and these rows, so that when you're looking at it, you can save it as an Excel file or a CSV file rather than just a straight text file, which is it's a very powerful and useful tool in some situations. But it's, once again, is based very much on the type of report that you've got and if it lends itself to that method. You can also save it. Okay, this is also an example of your web browser being able to display reports on different devices. So if you want to, just as you use any web browser to look at it. You can look at it on your phone or something. This is an example of choosing a particular database on the far left side. Once you get it, you're presented the center screen, and they'll say, okay, which database do I want to look at? And once you choose a database, then you go back into the search criteria that we were looking at before. Now, of course, once you've gotten the report listed, this is how the list of the results would be given to you. And once again, you've got the cycle numbers and that you can sort and organize to make it easier to look at on your device. Now, these are examples of using APIs to access our SEA data server. As I say, our TRIM system was designed to be an open system, and the web UI uses a set of APIs to access that report data through this SEA data server, and we make these APIs available to our customers, and that way to integrate them into their own applications. They may have some in-house applications, or they might have third-party applications that they want to use to tie into the TRIM's web UI, and just to make it a more of a better feel, or has just a design that's more keeping to their company. But as I say, these APIs can be in any one of these program language support. It has three different methods here. You have the filter, which gives you the example of how I want to choose the selection criteria for a particular search. The middle one is, okay, once I've executed the search, how do I want to view the results of this search? And then finally on the back side is, how do I display the line-by-line content of a particular report? So that's all of these can be accessed through the API. This here is a simple example of how you might code an API to initiate a session, sign on and give a user ID and password and make sure that it gets into the system. And once you're there, this is a sample of saying, okay, show me all the reports that begin with the letter A, and then of course terminate the session and get out. Once you get that, you'll be returned the results of that API. That'll give you all reports that begin with an A and the other criteria that might be part of that. The next screen is an example of how to code an API to view the actual content of the report, going a little bit further to say, okay, I want to see sections of this report that have to do with the sales report. And you can say, I want to look at a certain particular cycle of the report in the same way. It's just a little more detailed for that. And then, of course, this is how you might look at a report and how this might be returned to you. Okay, well, this is a new section now. We're going to be talking about what we call TRIM's view. And this is what Sal started talking about earlier, where you might have certain companies that are moving off of the mainframe, for example. They have these reports that have been traditionally residing on the ZOS platform, but we can't get rid of it for compliance reasons and all that. We've developed a way of taking these same reports that were created on TRIMs on the mainframe and being able to transfer them down to your network storage and still be able to access them through your web UI. So it's like another level of, say, migration or archiving your report. So you can say, okay, I want to take all the 2010 reports and drop them to the network so that I can look at them. This is becoming very popular as our users start considering migrating off of the mainframe. Now, this is the part where we're going to start talking about indexing. Before, when I was talking about a particular indexed report, that was what we might consider the traditional way of having an indexed report, where you've got a particular version of a particular report, and when you index it, that you're bound by that particular data set. What we've come up with is another way of indexing a report that spans different versions of the report. In fact, it actually spans different reports as well. So if you want to be, instead of looking at reports and using a criteria of, oh, show me all the reports that, you know, that follow some criteria, you can say, I'm going to set up an index that will refer to an employee number or something like that, and it will sit there and span different reports where that particular index value exists. So it could be a part of a payroll report, or it can be part of any other type of report that you have that you have set up to keep track of a particular, you know, employee ID, for example. That way, when you look at it, you'll see different reports on the top right-hand side. You'll say, here's, you know, we've used, you know, a state, so Alabama. Here are different versions of the report that refer to that particular indexed value, which is, but as I say, it's a very, very powerful method of searching through your data. And it's not, and what's important to remember is this is not limited to a specific version of a report. It's really throughout your enterprise. This next screen is an example of what we've provided is what we call a script studio, and it's a way of allows you to look at to test and create and debug scripts, and it allows you to use your already accumulated reports as a sample to say, okay, I have this report that I have been accumulating for some time now. Gee, I wish we had indexed this in a different way. And it allows you now to go back and look at this report and say, hey, look at these bits of data that are on the report that I'm going to sit there and I'm going to start using. I'm going to extract those and keep those as an indexed value that I can then, once you use it, and you can, it's a very easy method of debugging these scripts. But once you've got it, it'll show you what would happen in the real world. Once you've actually gotten it so that you've got it the way you want it to work, you can actually promote it and then use it on accumulated reports, so as if you had done it back, when years ago. And it's very, very, very helpful. It's a very powerful tool. This is an example of where you're actually looking at the report. You're saying, okay, let's go through the report, and it will show you a particular page of an accumulated report that you can say, I want to look at this row and this column and pull off this value in this situation, out the name Alabama, and you can say, okay, and I will store these so that later on I can use that as an index criteria, as you see in the next screen. Well, next screen is not this, though, so we're pretty much done at this point. I'm going to pass this back to Sal at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So, folks, this last discussion point about important considerations involves, probably the biggest challenge that people look at, which is if they're considering moving to a new report distribution system, report management system, what the biggest challenge is getting from what I have now to where I want to be. And yeah, there's an awful lot to consider, but the really cool thing is we've done this so many times now over many years that we've developed a great methodology, a lot of automation, tremendous amount of automation, and basically a process that gets it done with the highest quality in a very considerably short time, considering the amount of data that has to be transferred over. Eventually you have to consider three major areas when you're going to migrate these report systems. Number one is the definition database itself. That's a relatively small database, but we'll call it the configuration database. We call it the definition database. It's what houses who are my recipients, what are my reports, how many copies do people get, all that kind of stuff. But no report data itself, just strictly the metadata about the reports, right? So that has to get converted over, one. Secondly, you need to have all the training, two different types of training. Really, the administrator of the product is a much more involved aspect of training, as opposed to the end users who are typically just bringing up, looking at the reports on the web browser or what have you. And then thirdly is probably the thing that people think about the most, and they say, oh my God, we've got 3 million reports in our archives from, for the last 15, 20 years that have to be migrated over. And yes, that has to happen. And that's of course, as you would imagine, the longest elapsed time aspect of these kinds of projects. But we've also provided an awful lot of automation in that area as well. One of which, an important aspect of which, is automatically bringing down the reports from the current vendor's archive. We can't read that directly because that's a proprietary format, but we know how to let that product pull down. We pull down from its archive and move it over to the TRIMS archive. But in doing so, we make sure to retain the original accumulation date and the expiration date of that report. For example, if it was originally created or accumulated in 2015, and you've defined that you want to hold that report for 10 years, and you move it over in 2020, we retain the fact that 5 years have already passed, and it will expire in 2025. So we don't lose that metadata about its original accumulation and expiration. Very, very important as part of that process. Well, we go through all that. We work through that migration process from all aspects. Get you up in a running under TRIMS. Parallel process is a major part of it. In fact, we define an entire project plan and provide that as part of the work that we do, the engagement that we do to get you over to TRIMS. There is typically no additional fee for our services. It's included with the licensing of TRIMS. So that's a big factor. And all of this is to make it as straightforward as possible for our customers to move into a more modern, updated, business-friendly report management system. With that, I think we're going to go to some questions now. If I can, there we go. And I do think we do have some here. Let me see. Yeah, we do. Good. Okay. So let me. I'll ask a question, and we'll see which ones I'll pull off on Mark, and which ones that I'll do myself here. First question. How is security handled by TRIMS? Can we use our RACF rules to limit report access? That sounds like a question from Mark, if I ever heard him.
Thank you. Yes, the quick answer is absolutely yes. We have the ability both to use our internal security, so you can set up rules to say this report can be viewed by certain reports internally, so our own TRIMS rules, or we can pass this off and have this addressed by a third-party product, maybe RACF or ACF2 or Top Secret, something like that. But yeah, it's very simple. It really comes down to what the end user wants to do. You know, what we've been seeing in the recent is that most users are using their third party. If they've got a third party security package, they tend to use that, and rather than using our internal security. But we can go either way. So that's a quick answer.
Thanks, Mark. All right, the second question here, see. Can a product administration be done through the web UI? I'll let you take that one too, Mark.
Okay, well, the quick answer is not yet. Most of the product administration is done through our 3270 access for the database access. Right now, the only administration that we allow on the web UI is through the Studio script, which is just one particular function, but that will be growing in time, in short time, hopefully.
Great. Okay, next question. Is your GUI a true web GUI, or do we need to load an app on each user's desktop? Oh, no. I'll take that one, Mark. That's an easy one. No, it's a pure web, regular web browser. There's there's nothing to load on the user's desktop. Just you'll be given for your organization, you'll be given an app with a URL and take you right to trims. Let's see. Our users get to the reports from a CICS transaction. How would that work with your product, Mark?
Okay. We have a product called VCSI. It's a way of accessing the TRIMS database through VTAM access. So in the same way that your CICS transaction would make and go into access a log on an Apple ID, a VTAM Apple ID, you would connect to our VCSI product in the same method. So it would be, fairly transparent to the users. You'd still be able to connect through a CICS transaction if you wanted to do that.
Great. Okay. Here's another question. Does it have an integration or plugin with Topaz? Well, I'm going to say yes and no. I can take this one. Our output management products, there's two aspects to it. There's syslog, sysout management, and then there's the application report management. Sysout, syslog management is done through our product called Savers, and that does have a Topaz, CompuWare Topaz plugin, also has IBM IDZ plugin, and enterprise server plugin as well. But the TRIMS product, the report application, is a web UI, not a plugin. Okay. Got a question here. We're thinking of decommissioning obsolete reports. Is there a mass archive feature that we can use before the delete feature so that we can save the stuff we are decommissioning just in case we make a mistake? Absolutely. In fact, as part of that process that moves your data that we provide, that moves the data off of the mainframe and onto a Windows or Linux server, it is pulling out of the archive and at that point before moving it down. So whatever you want to move down, by default, you're already capturing and making a copy of, if you will, and you can hold on to that and for whatever reason you need to. Okay. Let's see. Can you give us an idea of how long it typically takes to migrate from an existing product to TRIMS? Oh my, well, it depends. That's the old answer, right? It depends. I'll tell you what, as I mentioned before, the migration process itself, you've got the smaller metadatabase of the configuration, who who gets the reports, what the reports names are, recipients, etc. Okay, that part of it, we do it all in an automated way, and we can be done that in a couple of weeks, literally that fast. Okay, and you could be up and accumulating new reports into TRIMS that quickly. However, now you've got to move all those legacy archive reports over, maybe millions of them, right? Who knows, over to the TRIMS archive. That's what takes the longest period of time. And that is where it depends comes in, because we just don't know. That depends on how many reports do you have, what kind of resources are you going to commit to doing that, the move over to the TRIMS archive. Most folks, what they do is we establish a benchmark. We'll say, okay, let's see how long it takes to do 10,000 reports, and we use that as a benchmark, and then we extrapolate, and then we say, okay, if you run, for 8 hours a day, for example, it'll take you, 57 days to accomplish the complete move of all your archives. So that's what we have to do. And we do that as part of the, that process where we're doing the assessment and the estimation. And so you have a good idea as soon as we can about how long the full process will take. And let's see. We have one more question. Is this mainframe only, or can the entire system be run on a distributed platform? And also, what are your plans around the cloud? Okay. At this point, TRIMS is a mainframe system. Okay, I'll put it that way. It accumulates reports and presents them, etc., in a browser, or prints them, mainframe printer, if you still do that type of thing. That's all done. That's on the mainframe. There's one portion of TRIMS that could be on a distributed system, and that is the discussion around what we talked about. When you want to move a set of archive reports, however many they might be, off of the mainframe, or the mainframe is going away, or the application is going off the mainframe, and you want to still have access to them from the browser. But in that case, there's no accumulation being done on the network. It's strictly the old reports are moved to the network. You still have access to them for as long as you need from the browser, just like you were on the mainframe, browsing the reports from there. But it's all, I'll call it static reports that have been created. They were on the mainframe archive, now they're on a network archive, but no new reports are being accumulated on the network. We don't have that capability yet. And what about our plans around the cloud? Well, that piece that I just mentioned, the Windows / Linux piece for, we call it TRIMS View, that certainly can run in the cloud. And in fact, we have one customer who is running that in the cloud. All right. I think that's it. That's all the questions that we have at the moment. I thank you very much. Mark and I are happy to have done this for you. And if you have any questions, just contact us at info@ciasoft.com. We're happy to answer anything beyond this. I know some folks will think of some more questions after the after this. So, okay, thank you very much. Have a great one.